How was opening a coffee shop different from what you were doing with the farming and the exporting, importing, roasting?
I think the difficult part or the differences are it's so customer focused, face forward. You know, you're serving somebody a cup of coffee, you're engaging directly. When you roast 50 pounds of coffee, you put it in a bag and you put it in the mail, there's no direct interaction with the customer. If you take it to a restaurant, we supply some restaurants. Again, I interact with the restaurant, but it's business to business.
Yeah, you're controlling the whole supply chain, basically.
Yeah, so I mean, it's more work, obviously, from start to finish. We do it all. We grow it, we export it, we import it, we roast it, bag it, sell it. So it's more expenses initially. You're taking on the whole thing.
And you're also opening a coffee shop, right?
From teaching in Dubai to running a 20-acre coffee farm in Uganda and a roastery in Canada, today I sit down with Kingsley Griffin, founder of Kingha Coffee. We talk about building a farm-to-cup business, controlling the full supply chain, and the lessons behind turning passion into purpose. Let's dive in.
Hi, Kingsley, how are you doing?
Yeah, really well. How are you?
I'm good. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'd love to. My name is Kingsley Griffin, and I'm the owner of two companies which are very closely related. One is Kingha Coffee in Uganda, which is a 20-acre coffee farm where I've been working for a decade growing coffee and shipping it around the world. And then in March of this year, we opened up a roastery in White Rock, British Columbia, quite close to Vancouver, where all the coffee that we grow in Uganda is now shipped to my company here in British Columbia. So it's a full circle coffee roastery, and I'm involved in all aspects of it.
And were you selling the coffee to someone else before this happened? Like someone else was roasting it for you?
Yeah, I was roasting it myself in my garage and in my little coach house in my shed, trying to see if there was enough of an interest in actually roasting the coffee to take that plunge. With the coffee in Uganda, we've had great success in selling it for 10 years to Australia, Middle East, Europe, some to Canada, some to the US. So we've been doing quite a bit of selling from Uganda, but it just seemed like a nice opportunity to kind of close the loop, since I now live here most of the time in BC, to close the loop on everything and have the full service coffee from my farm to my roastery to you to whoever would like to enjoy it, really.
I was going through your background, and what I noticed was you were a teacher at one point, and then you went into the coffee industry. So how did that happen?
Yeah, I'll try and not ramble on too long because it's a great story, but it can take a while to tell the whole thing. My wife and I went to Uganda initially from Dubai. We were both teachers at an American school in Dubai, and we went to Uganda in 2014 to go see the mountain gorillas and the lions and the hippos and all the amazing things you find in these beautiful African countries. Part of our trip there, we spent some time with a school called St. Matthew's School. And since we were both educators, we really enjoyed that time. Spent the afternoon and did some guest teaching and just little bits and pieces. But it was great. And we decided that we wanted to try and do something more longer term. So fast forward 6 months, and I found myself living in a small little hut on the side of the road in Uganda. I had taken my summertime, come back, and I lived in this little hut. And I spent my summer, so about 2.5 months, volunteering at the school full time. So I'd go there and we'd do teacher training, we'd build toilets and classrooms and uniform donations, gardens, goat sheds, the whole thing. Just really getting involved in all aspects of the school running itself, and living in this little roadside hut with no electricity, no running water, very much like up country, very, very rural Ugandan life. And I loved it. At the end of the 2 months, it wasn't enough. It was a taste, but it wasn't the full meal, so to speak. So for whatever reason, my wife and I decided to purchase 20 acres of land in Uganda and try growing coffee. So we had no experience as farmers, besides what you do as a kid and you're growing some flowers in your garden. But we decided to go into this full time, bought 20 acres of land, and I went to the village next to the farm and said, does anybody want to help me plant coffee? And we negotiated a price per coffee tree, and we planted 20,000 trees in the ground. And over time, a very small charity project became a larger internationally recognized coffee farm. We ended up winning some awards along the way, and what turned out as kind of a charity passion project turned into a charity business project, which is now a full-time enterprise where we have the whole coffee thing, and we go from start to finish, but it's very much an educational charity.
And how was the learning experience? How did you learn about the whole processing? I don't know anything. So if you can cover like from the beginning to like the roasting,
I
how
mean,
all
it
is
was,
involved.
yeah, it was tough to learn. I mean, going from, because we were living in Dubai, so Uganda is relatively close. If you think about Canada, Toronto to Vancouver is 5 hours. Dubai to Uganda is 5 hours. It's a similar flight path. So most of my time as a teacher, you have, Christmas off, and you have Easter and Thanksgiving and summertime. So all these holidays, I would take all my free time and go to Uganda. But before I could grow coffee, I had to learn how to grow coffee. So I went to Ethiopia, which is arguably the birthplace of coffee. Yemen would argue otherwise, but between those two countries, I would go there and I learned how to grow coffee, how to wash coffee, how to dry coffee, the whole process of farming, essentially. Learned that, went to Uganda, taught my staff, and then spent, 8 years really perfecting how to grow coffee. And the nice thing is, from the beginning, we've never used chemicals or pesticides or anything else other than just local fertilizer. When I mean local fertilizer, I mean cow manure, sheep manure, So it's all very much 100% from the earth, back into the earth. And so the coffee quality is really good. When I realized how good the coffee was, we started entering competitions and placing in the top 5, then the top 3, top 15 in East Africa. The quality is really, really high. So I thought, well, if the coffee is great, maybe I can find a market for it in North America. At some point, open a roastery here, which we did. But it all started with this kind of idea of making sure that the coffee itself was really good. Not just being one more company with a kind of volume aspect, more of really nice coffee from a small part of the world with a charity ethos at heart. And that's kind of the basis of what Kingha is. And from that, then the roasting just sort of a natural progression to come here in Canada and roast coffee and get it out into the community.
And how long did it take for you guys to become profitable?
To become profitable, the farm is difficult. 5 years for the farm, I think, because you have to wait for coffee itself. After 3 years, you get a small harvest, but you don't get enough coffee to start paying for anything until 5 years. So 5 years was the first decent sized harvest where we could actually pay for our expenses, and then to pay off everything else. Maybe 7 years as a farmer. Farming's slow. It's really, really slow. And then here in Canada, I think we're profitable in probably about 18 months. We've been open for 6, and we're getting close already. So it's pretty quick climb here, but only because I think we have the farm. So it's this nice full circle aspect, and that really helps to increase the profitability.
Yeah, you're controlling the whole supply chain, basically.
Yeah, so I mean, it's more work, obviously, from start to finish. We do it all. We grow it, we export it, we import it, we roast it, bag it, sell it. So it's more expenses initially. You're taking on the whole thing. But then you have the ability to play with your margins a little bit more and to work on kind of the end profitability and say, okay, if we can grow it for this and ship it for this, if we can sell it for that, then there's your profit margin in the roasted coffee. So the bigger profitability is here in Canada, but the expenses are higher as well. You have to pay much more reasonable wages, or we assume they're reasonable, but as a business model, it's much more expensive to run a business here than in Uganda.
Makes sense. And how is the import-export process like, the documentation involved there?
It's not bad. In Uganda, it's pretty simple. You get the coffee, you mill it in a factory, and then the government arm called the Uganda Coffee Development Authority, they come by and they inspect it and they stamp it, and then you send it to port and they ship it. So it's not too much work. Here in Canada, it's more difficult because the Canadian Border Services may or may not decide to have a look at it. And if they do, they can hold it for 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, 1 month. So it's really more difficult bringing it in than it is getting it out.
And did you figure all of this out by yourself, or did you get a lawyer for this stuff?
No, I mean, I figured it out with the help of a really good importing company here in BC. They're based out of Richmond. They were fantastic. And then in Uganda, I had figured it out myself. I just went down to the government and said, what do I have to do? What does it take? And they asked for various paperwork and sometimes some small facilitation, which we provided in the form of uniforms. It wasn't difficult. It was just time consuming.
And you're also opening a coffee shop, right?
We opened last week. Yeah, last Tuesday. So now we're open right across the street from my roastery at a place called Michael's Artisan Bakery. There's now a Kingha Coffee shop in there. So that's up and running as of, I guess today's the first week, 1 week today. So
that is pretty cool, like going directly to the end consumers. You're like controlling the whole flow. So Since you didn't have a shop before this, like what is the profitability margin like when you go to the consumers directly instead of selling it to someone else?
I mean, some of those things are kind of trade secrets, so we can't get into all the numbers. But each step of the way has this profitability, and each. So when you grow coffee, all your expenses, you have to make a bit of money when you sell the raw product, and then when you sell it as a retail product, you got to cover all your import and export costs. So each step has its margin into it, but there's no gigantic profitability window. It's all sort of, you look at the most profitable part of it and you try and focus on that. It may be a coffee shop. We're only a week old, so I don't have all the numbers. From the first week it was great, but the first week is always friends and family coming by and lots of fanfare. Ask me again in a few months. I may have some more concrete numbers, but I think that the highest profitability percentage will probably be in the roasted coffee. Since it's my own coffee I grow, then I have more say in what I charge myself.
And how are you trying to differentiate yourself compared to other coffee shops? There's so many coffee shops.
There's too many. There's so many. I mean, the biggest point of differentiation is that there's no other full circle coffee businesses here in Canada, or at least in British Columbia. I mean, if you walk into a coffee shop and I can serve you a cup of coffee and they say, oh, where do you get your coffee from? And I can say, I grew it. And they say, no, you didn't. I say, yeah, I grew it myself. And that's a massive differentiation right there. And then I start talking about the story and how it's an educational charity in Uganda and how we work with 5 different schools and uniforms and clothing and donations and scholarships. And then so if they're buying a cup of coffee from me, essentially a farmer, part of that sale goes right back to our projects in Uganda. So the differentiation comes from one being probably the only full circle roastery in British Columbia, and also just the work I do in Uganda. From the beginning, it's been about how do we make sure that whatever impact I make is positive and lasting in whatever way I can.
And how was opening a coffee shop different from what you were doing with the farming and the exporting, importing, roasting?
I think the difficult part, or the differences are, it's so customer focused, face forward. You're serving somebody a cup of coffee, you're engaging directly. When you roast 50 pounds of coffee, you put it in a bag and you put it in the mail, there's no direct interaction with the customer. If you take it to a restaurant, we supply some restaurants, again, I interact with the restaurant, but it's business to business. So being in a cafe where you are meeting the customers directly, speaking directly, it's a lot more face to face, which is great, but it's also very different. So you learn a different way of interacting, and you learn the importance, I have quickly, that really personalized touch and the customer service, and making sure that when you serve somebody a cup of coffee, you do it with heart and intention, and you let them know that they're making your day a little bit better by being there.
Have you heard of this coffee chain called Luckin?
Luckin? No.
It's a chain from China, and their whole focus is about getting the customers to use the app to order, and they can come and pick it up from the kiosk or the shop. And I think they opened their first couple of coffee shops in US this June 2025.
Okay.
And they became really popular in China. I think they're doing better than Starbucks in China. And it's all about like affordability, convenience, accessibility. That's why it's all app focused.
Yeah.
Kind of like Starbucks drive-through, It's so interesting to because there's so many of these like chains coming out doing this, like having a personalized experience when there's a person serving you and telling you the story about the coffee.
I like that. I mean, that could be, we're only a week into this. So for us, it's a lot of learning at this point. It's really just seeing what works, what doesn't work, how to personalize it. I'm always looking for new and exciting ways to make the coffee, to just get more of the story out there and get more reach. And if that's the way to do it, I'm be happy to look into it. I mean, there's so much you learn so quickly. If you're growing the coffee, it's one part of it. If you're roasting, it's one part of it. You're exporting, it's one part of it. So all these parts of it together. I mean, this morning I spent the first 3 hours of today visiting different clients, setting up little pop-up coffee tastings here and there, just making sure that people are really happy with what we do.
That's amazing. Yeah, learning is part of the journey. So you have been doing this for 10 years, I think more than 10 years now. So how has the process changed? Like what tools or technology are you using, and how has that changed over time? Like you must be using paper pencil at one point, now you're like using Excel sheets. How has that changed?
Because there's so many different parts of it, I guess I can address them one by one. The farm in Uganda, farming doesn't change much, essentially. You put the trees in the ground, you harvest the coffee, you process it. What does change is the method of data tracking, like you're saying, Excel spreadsheets versus pen and pencil. One of the biggest things I learned is that the area we're in is fairly underprivileged. And so the talent pool that you're looking to hire from has a very different educational level than you may be used to in other countries. And so one of the things I learned from the beginning was that most of the staff is very basic computer knowledge, if any at all. So like you said, we started off pencil and paper, old-fashioned notebook, and teaching them how to use computers was one of the first things we had to do. And so they could then graduate to Excel. And then now you graduate to an online format of Excel where they enter the stuff in Uganda and it comes in real time on my computer here. I can check our inventory, check our stock, check our harvest numbers. And all that has come on very slowly, actually. It hasn't been a fast process, but we're at the point now where it runs much more smoothly. Initially, it was a pen and paper, and then they would take a picture, the phone they had, which was a $5 phone from the village. So we had to go in and get all nicer phones so that the technology was more compatible and build from there. And then we moved into the roasting portion of it. Based on the knowledge we had from our stuff in Uganda, we streamlined it much more quickly here in Canada because you have all those tools here. Everybody's computer literates. Everybody wants to be, in real time on laptops or, on their phones or whatever it is. So then we use, online documents for all of our tracking and record keeping and employee paying and payroll. Everything else is automated here compared to Uganda, which is still very much a slower and more traditional system of record keeping. Even with the computers and stuff, you get these giant storms, internet's out for a day or a week, no electricity for a week. So you have to have all these workarounds because sometimes you don't have access to technology. Whether you have it or not, you can't use it. So we still do a lot of pen and paper there, but much more automated here.
It reminds me of the people process technology framework. There's no point getting the technology in there if people don't know how to use it. And there's no process.
I tried. I brought in laptops and I'm like, here you go. And they were like, we don't know how to type. I said, oh, okay. Well, let's go back. So one of my staff, Ida, who's wonderful, been with us now for almost 10 years. We sent her to essentially typing school. I don't know if they have those anymore here in Canada, but it was just like, learn how to type, learn how to write your name, learn what an email is. Such basic stuff that kids nowadays grow up with from day one. That was the starting process out there.
Interesting. And what do you think is like the most time-consuming steps in this process?
In the whole process in general, like everything?
Yeah.
Yeah. Most time-consuming, but most rewarding for me is the same. Customer relationships. I don't think that you can build a successful business if you don't have a successful relationship with your customers. Because, like you said, there's so many coffee companies, there's so many cafes, so many roasters. Why buy from anybody? And I think what takes the most time for me is building relationships. But then you build relationships, you build solid ones, and that time you invest in that, one, it's rewarding. 2, I love it. And 3, it has dividends in the long run. So it may take a very long time, but then you have this word of mouth thing where people just start asking and hearing about you. And because you've taken the time to really invest in your customer base and your clients, and you actually genuinely care for their well-being, that investment pays off very much in the long run. So I think that's where most of my time goes.
And that means like branding and marketing is really important.
Hugely so. Yeah, you have to have I was having a conversation with a friend of mine today who's got a charity. We're actually teaming up for a golf tournament. We're going to be hosting a large charity golf tournament. So he and I were talking about that. And, we both said to each other kind of at the same time, your reputation, your branding is key. And if you have a good reputation, it takes so long to build that and it's so quick to lose that. And so that consistent branding, the consistent messaging, and really having a great reputation is as everything. And if you lose that, you just kind of fall down. So you have to really invest in that part of your business. And once you have that, you have to keep it.
Yeah, especially with social media, like losing the reputation is so easy.
Happens so fast. 1 or 2 negative posts and people start talking negatively, and before you know it, it's some downward spiral. So you really have to just be so careful and so consistent. But I love it. I really like time with people. I like spending my time meeting, talking and discussing and smiling and having a good time.
And have you thought about, it might be too soon to ask this question, was because you just opened your shop, but have you thought about how you would go about marketing it here? There is an option of getting influencers to your shop and they post about you. There's so many options nowadays.
Yeah, influencers is an interesting one. I've done some research into it, and I don't know if the impact is worth the investment. I think it's not. Maybe you know more. Maybe you can help me with that one. This is more maybe in your wheelhouse than mine.
So I was gonna say my next question would have been have you thought about AI and how do you you want to use it. But I think AI could help a lot with like the marketing and the branding piece, and also the like doing cold outreach. Like if you're roasting your own coffee, right? You want to outreach to different shops and like ask them like, are you looking for coffee? And our coffee is specialized in this is blah blah. Personalize the email to them. Like you can do that with AI. The same goes for like marketing and stuff. Like if you want to post on social media, again, like if you have I think in this year 2025, it's necessary for you to have a TikTok profile, an Instagram profile, a Facebook profile, especially a
Yeah.
TikTok profile, especially like if you're going to target Gen Z and millennials, like you need to have Instagram and TikTok.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And again, like AI can help. Now there are so many good models out there that can generate videos as well as images. So you can like create your own advertisements as well, like define what your brand should look like, what image, what logo, what name, what font, which color, and then you can generate images and videos utilizing those things. But then there are these other options that I was talking about, like influencers, and you have AI influencers as well nowadays, which are getting really popular. So I'm just like listing out all the options there with like AI and marketing and cold outreach.
Yeah, I think what would be helpful after listening to you, from my point of view, from where we are as a company with the AI, we have the Instagram, we have the accounts, we're out there, we're posting followers, liking this and that. We're doing all of that. But what I'd like more of is the back end, the tracking. What's the effect? If I get 5,000 likes, does that make one sale, two sales, no sales? How do you, so when you ask me about influencers, my first question would be, how does their time translate to direct sales for the company? It's not about like, followers are wonderful, but do followers equal sales? Or is it just people following it because they want the return follow? So I think the AI component that I'd be more interested in would be, how does the AI do all the collating of data and send that back to me in an easy to understand package or format where I'm not then having to hire somebody else and pay them to do the same work.
Here, the important piece would be measuring. If you don't measure, you wouldn't know. And
No.
this is where like apps come handy. That's why a lot of like you would see a lot of brands introducing their own apps because they want you as a user to have a profile with them so that they can
Yes.
figure out like if you're coming to their store to order, you're using their app. That's why you end up scanning your app in Starbucks as well, even though you're not using anything from for the stars, for the points. You would do that. So they would be able to figure out Apurva came to Starbucks today and she got a matcha latte. She does that every Friday. So they have a profile on. Otherwise, like if I come in and you don't know me in person, you wouldn't know who came in. There are a lot of like companies out there who track people so you can get their mobile data and you can like figure out like her phone was like moving around in that area and she came into the shop. But like, did she make a purchase? Like what happened at that time? So that's why a lot of these brands have these applications. Like you download our app and you scan it and it'll give you, they have a point and reward system so that
I see the value for sure. I see the value in it's data mining, finding out someone's habits and their spending habits and where they go and what they do, and then you can steer them more towards your own brand, your own coffee. In my case, coffee, of course. So yeah, when you're talking about AI, that would be more of the tracking and the data collation and saying, okay, if we put out all these posts and it hits all these people who are part of our followers or part of our system, what does that translate to? Does Jim come in 4 days a week and buy a coffee every day, or does he see an ad, look at it, close his phone, and never come in? What's the reach?
Yeah.
What's the return on that investment? So if I'm paying somebody to do that, what do they cost me versus what does it cost to pay an AI to do that, or a company that runs an AI? So what's a better investment of my money and my time, and what's the better return?
Yeah, makes sense. And for that, you need to track them because one thing is happening in person, the other thing is happening online. So you need to connect those two dots together to figure out if it's really happening or not. The other thing I was thinking about was like, do you have issues forecasting like with the supply chain?
No. I mean, fortunately, before I started this roasting cafe journey, a decade of work on the ground in Uganda builds up a really strong supply chain and a really efficient forecasting model. So the only way that would be more of a challenge for me would be if I were unable to have the access that I have. So currently, a lot of roasting businesses, their model is to buy from an importer. So they go to importer XYZ and purchase coffee and they roast it and sell it. But since we're the importer, we're also the exporter. The supply chain for us is pretty solid.
And is there any impact because of the environment changes?
Pardon me?
Climate.
Oh, climate change. Funny enough, we had a good friend of mine, his name is Mohammed. He came down 2 years ago to do a documentary on climate change and coffee. And in the works with Netflix, it'll probably come out 6 months to a year, where we spent a long time visiting visiting my coffee farm and farmers in the area and discussing climate change. The biggest impact that I've seen, and this is throughout my area, I can't speak for other areas, is a shift in the seasonality. So we still have consistent rain, consistent sunshine, it's just at a different time of year. So the effect is that it's changing when we have coffee as opposed to changing the volume. So that's something we can currently work with. Just it means that coffee arrives here at different times of year. Fine. It just, as long as it doesn't impact the actual growing cycle, it's okay.
And what do you think the future is going to be like?
It depends. If things keep heating up, then coffee will have to go higher. I don't know how much coffee knowledge you and the listeners have. Essentially, the higher you go with coffee, the higher the quality from the mountains. Not always, but as a general rule of thumb, coffee needs to kind of cool in the evening and hot in the daytime. So you're up in the higher elevations in the mountains, you get those cool nights and kind of hot days. And that's sort of ideal for coffee. If you're too low, then the temperature fluctuations aren't enough for the coffee really to produce as well as it needs. So as things warm up, you get a smaller fluctuation in the nighttime and daytime temperatures, which affects the coffee quality and the production of the trees. So what may end up happening is to produce the same quality or volumes, you have to go higher up the mountain.
And is the industry doing anything about it, like getting any cheaper substitutes? Because I heard about that in a podcast.
Yeah, there is some, but I mean, we discussed that briefly. I think chicory coffee, and there are other different substitutes, but really, end of the day, people want coffee. They want the actual cup of coffee, and the coffee substitutes are there, but I think what needs to happen, and we're doing this actually as a farm, because we are regenerative agricultural practices, which means that we have a full biodiverse ecosystem on our coffee farm. We've planted so many indigenous shade trees and fruit trees so that the impact that we have from the coffee farming is more than negated by the level of agriculture we provide for the natural environment. If more and more farmers were to farm the way that we do, then the impacts would be mitigated just at the farmer level. But unfortunately, there's still a huge push to use inorganic fertilizer, which, bleaches the soil and creates more climate issues.
I guess short-term profits.
Yeah, I mean, everybody wants, cash is king. They want $1 in front of them. But really, you got $1 today, you've got no dollars tomorrow. So we've done this beautiful thing with our land where it's going to be productive for as long as we possibly can with the way we've cared for the soil. We just, we've taken care of it with love, like you'd take care of anything you love. And the returns are there in the quality and the consistency. So I work with 1,000 farmers in the area, and we do a lot of training with the farmers around this, and some success and some failures, but we're getting more and more successful. And more farmers are asking for us to come help and take over their agricultural production so that we can get them to the point where their farm is sustaining for 20, 30, 40 years, not just, one or two.
I have one last question. How do you communicate with 1,000 farmers?
Do you know what? It's pretty crazy, actually. And I don't know if anybody else would be quite this maybe level of personalized. But I will rent a motorcycle from the small village, these little teeny motorcycles called bodas, and I'll drive up the mountain and I'll meet farmers along the way. And I'll sit down with them and say, "Hi, I'm Kingsley and I've got a coffee farm and I'd like to work with you." And they say, "What are you doing here? Why are you on top of the mountain on a motorcycle? Kind of what's wrong with you?" Essentially. And I'll say, I just like what I do. I like this part of the world. I like working with you. And if you're up for it, I'd love to come and help you grow better coffee. And then their first question is, what are you going to charge me? I say, nothing. Just want to come help you. And if your coffee quality increases to the point that I can buy it from you and sell it, I'd love to. Otherwise, I'll still help you. But the idea is that your coffee gets very, very nice. I can pay you a great price and I can then take that coffee and use it further down the line. But initially, it's me on a motorcycle visiting village after village after village. And then once I've signed up villages or farmers, then, I'll visit them again, not as frequently, but every farmer we work with, I have a personal relationship with from day one. It's wild, but it's great. You should come sometime. I'll put you can hop on the back of the motorcycle or get your own motorcycle and we'll go visit some farmers. It's a lot of fun.
That is very cool. I do want to visit your coffee shop. So is there any way users can connect with you, and how do they get to your coffee shop?
The coffee shop is located on 24th Avenue and 156th Avenue in South Surrey. It's inside a bakery called Michael's Bakery. So we've teamed up with the bakery. They had a cafe space and we've come in and kind of taken that space so they can come visit us in person. They can find us through Instagram, through our website, kinghacoffee.com. Instagram is Kingha Canada, so at Kingha Canada. Facebook, we don't have an app yet, but after this conversation, we may get one very soon. So yeah, reach out through Instagram, Facebook, website, come in person. We'd love to have you.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Kingsley.
Yeah, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.